So more layoffs are coming. We were warned about the layoffs by several companies. We were warned that if we did not see a stimulus package passed, we were warned that companies would start to lay off. And this is due to an inability of congressional leaders. I'm going to, quite frankly, put this more on congressional leaders more than I will the White House. I mentioned in the previous episode that, and I'm not just saying this out of sympathy for the president, given the fact that he now has COVID-19. If you, again, look back at Wednesday's episode, I mentioned that the president, quite frankly, when it comes to all of the Republicans, he really is the only Republican at this point who is actually looking to get a deal for the American people. Now, you might kind of disagree with some of the tactics being used. You might disagree with some of his representatives, maybe Mark Meadows, who knows? But at the very least, you do have to look at his actions and what he has been willing to do and compare that with other Republicans and what they've been unwilling to do. And if you're honest, you do have to admit that any action really that we have seen from any Republicans that have actually benefited American people has come from the president of the United States. So again, I'm not going to lay blame here on the president when I consider the inability of a package to be passed. I'm going to place that blame on congressional leaders. And so the fact that they have not come up with a stimulus package, again, has been the fuel for some companies to say, hey, look, we don't have anything passed. So as a result of that, we have no more money to operate, and we're going to have to take the scissors and cut some losses here. So this week, we have, for instance, Walt Disney. They've announced that they're going to be cutting around 28,000 jobs in both the state of Florida and California. And it's pretty kind of weird when you look at the two. When you look at California, California has a lot of restrictions still that aren't necessarily in place in Florida. So a bulk of those cuts are going to come from California, but they are still going to have to come and do some cutting in Florida as well. I'm not quite... with Florida, well, here's the thing. With Florida, while there aren't really the restrictions, quite frankly, Americans aren't willing to really risk their lives and come out and be happy in Disneyland while there's still a pandemic going on. And I just want to note that, because I want politicians to consider that. For the politicians out there who are operating under this guise of just, open everything and just by opening it, people are going to come. You're kind of operating in the same sense as some startups, where they figure, well, if I just open a business, if I just put up a website, if I just do, business is going to come. And if you ask anybody who's ever had a business, they will tell you that is not how it works, right? They're one of the important components that you have to have when you have that new business is you have to have a certain level of trust. Consumers have to trust you, and you have to be able to build that either before they come into your store, or you have to be able to build it, immediately when there's that initial contact when they come in. But in this case, as it relates to the opening of the economy, the opening and just saying, hey, everything's open, all doors are open, come on in, guys, you have to realize that we don't live in a dictatorship, right? Americans have choice. I mentioned several episodes ago about how one of the things that is actually trying to be taken away from Americans at this point is choice, right? But that was kind of said under the context of, when you get stimulus as an American, you make the choice of how to spend it, yada, yada, yada. So it's not exactly the same deal. But again, the theme here is choice. Regardless of, if a governor goes around and opens every door in his state, leaves it wide open and yells, come on in, folks, great Americans, open again. And, we're open to the people, for the people, and by the people. That does not mean that the people are going to come and waddle their way through the doors. People are scared. Most people know that most people know that COVID-19 is more than just a cold or the flu. Most Americans understand that, hey, People are dying out here. Most people understand that, people are really getting on ventilators. And yeah, some people are making it off. I personally know a few people who've made it off of ventilators. I know, I kid you not. Let me tell you something. I know 17 people who have had COVID-19. 17 people. Luckily, by the grace of God, as I see it, all of them are alive. But you can't tell me that COVID-19 has no negative implications and that we can just go out here and live lives as normal. Now, am I saying that some people, in some states we have to have the same restrictions, or in some states, it's all as bad as other? No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that you are absolutely kidding yourself if you think otherwise. But bringing that back to the topic at hand, what we see, what Walt Disney has seen, I think needs to be a case study for politicians. Because especially when we have this talk about, and I've said it several times, the PPP was one of the least effective forms of stimulus. I'm not going to dive into that again, but when you, for instance, just throw money at these companies, as was done with Walt Disney, and you allow them to just have a free-for-all, you bail them out, you give them corporate welfare, sure, they get money to sustain themselves for a while, as we just saw. But when the money is gone, unless there are consumers there to utilize their products, their services, the money's going to dry up. That's what we have seen. So I think especially politicians that support kind of a larger stimulus package, I might go so far as to say, look, you might even be able to come down on your numbers by taking out the PPP. But if you have to support the PPP, if you realize that that's the only way you're going to be able to get the other side to go along with anything you want, maybe that's the program in which you need to make your cuts. But anywho, again, I think that Florida and California need to be a case study because you have one state that is, has severe restrictions, and we're hearing everywhere that the problem with the economy is that states are closed. Why are we not hearing anywhere that in places where everything is open, things still haven't rebounded to the same effect or the same extent that people would have thought that the rebound would have happened? We're not hearing about that, right? Because it doesn't suit their narrative. We're not hearing about that because then when you do hear about that, then it completely destroys their argument that everything needs to be open. Let's make the case for them. Let's make the case for that governor out there in Florida. Let's say you open everything. Everything is open, no mask. Oh, wait, it's kind of close to reality, right? But let's say, for instance, that everything is open and we're just living as normal. When things still don't rebound, then what are you going to blame it on then? Are you going to say that that Democrats from another state came in and they are scaring? What are you going to blame it on? What? Admit the fact that people have a choice, and the choice that people are making is that they are scared for their lives. They are scared for their elderly parents. They are scared for their children, and they don't want them to die. But anywho, moving on for that. So that's what we see going on with Walt Disney. We heard, obviously, everyone's been talking about the airlines in recent weeks, and namely United and American Airlines. They have plans to essentially furlough 32,000 employees. And one of the things that I've been seeing online is, now you can say what you want. You can say, obviously a lot of, there's this kind of domino effect with the airline industry. Oh, if you don't fund airlines, people can't travel and things kind of come to a halt. Things are to a halt anyways. I finally heard, I don't recall who it was, a politician yesterday. Again, my memory is horrible. I really need to start writing stuff down. But I finally heard for the first time a politician openly say that, yes, helping the airlines is important, the airline industry. But at the same time, they are not the only industry that is suffering. Yes, it's important to help restaurants, but they are not the only industry that is suffering. Now, that's not to minimize the fact that they are suffering, but it's to acknowledge the fact that other people in other industries are suffering. And so when we are running around here saying, oh, but the airline industry, but this industry, but this industry. Okay, tell that to the other people who were having to go file unemployment if they are able to, because some states, at this point have kind of stopped accepting new unemployment applications. Tell that to the people who are having to go and file unemployment applications, having to go and get food stamps, or having to tell their children that they can't do this, can't, like, go and tell that to those people who were in other industries that, well, we only care about certain industries. Now, maybe obviously what you have to do is allocate more resources to certain industries than others, but we cannot live in a society where we only favor assisting certain people, especially when in Florida, say, for example, you realize that given consumer choice, when you look at the fact that people have choices, again, when you look at the fact that people have choices, they may not always choose to support the industries or the businesses that politicians want to prop up. What happened to free market economy? It boggles my mind. We want to yell free market economy, free market this, free market that in certain instances when it relates to certain things. But in other areas, in other instances, free market economy, economy schmonomy, right? So that's going on with United. And then here's one that was relatively kind of new to me, Allstate, the insurance company. They are trimming about 8%, well, actually 7.5% of their workforce, which comes out to slightly under 4,000 jobs. Again, layoffs are coming. In some cases, layoffs are already here. They've been here for months. Now, yeah, certain companies are just coming around to the party. They're late joining the party, but they're joining the party that has been going on for some Americans for months. Some businesses have been closed for months. But these people are lucky enough to have just been joining the party. Here I go again, not remembering who it was, but I read an article, I believe it was yesterday or maybe the day before, of the CEO of a company. Gosh, again, I apologize. I need to start really writing stuff down. I was reading an article where, apologies for that, a CEO, a billionaire CEO nonetheless, of a tech company, he flat out said as well, like, do not give another dime to these larger companies. Again, the Republicans, specifically the Senate Republicans, like to use the word targeted when they talk about future stimulus. This billionaire CEO mentioned the fact that the next stimulus package needs to be targeted to small businesses and individual Americans. This is how you create demand in the economy. We have already seen the data that suggests that the people who really were not in a position where they needed stimulus, what did they do with that money? They saved it. Did that stimulate the economy? No. The large companies you gave money to that were able to stave off closure for a few months, given the loans that they received, the PPP loans, were they able to stave off closing for a few months? Sure. But as soon as that money was gone, when they had no customers, what did they have to do? Close. Did that make it really effective? Just for a few months. So if the goal was to just buy a few months worth of time, then yes, you accomplished what you were supposed to accomplish. But if the goal was to actually help the economy in a more comprehensive fashion, more than just kind of the short-sighted kind of help, you did not accomplish your goal. And we finally had someone, and I was like, whoa, like, this dude is telling the truth. Amen, brother man. So at the end of the day, personally, I was off yesterday, and my team knew I was off, so I wasn't like really interacting with anybody, because I was doing some travel yesterday, and I was even though I was off, I was paying attention to what was going on. And if you paid attention yesterday, Americans kind of got dragged through the mud regarding stimulus talks. We heard that, oh, well, here's, Nancy Pelosi's skinny new bill, and, we're going to talk to Steve. We're going to talk to Mnuchin about this, and feeling very hopeful. After that talk, oh, well, we're expecting Mnuchin to come back with something. He's going to come back with the counter offer. Steve Mnuchin came back with the counter offer of $1.62 trillion. That counter offer was a no-go for the Democrats. Then it was like, okay, well, then the House is going to go ahead and vote on the $2.2 trillion bill. Then it was like, oh, wait, no, we're going to allow a little bit more time, and then we're going to talk a little bit more, and then we're going to be able to come back with something. And then they have the conversation. And then what happened after that conversation? We're out of luck. You're SOL. Like, nothing's going to happen. We were dragged through the mud yesterday. Like wild hogs, dirty pigs, dragged, kicking, screaming, oinking. And it was no fun. It was no fun to see, because you were dealing with real people's lives. I know that they only think the real people's lives that they are affecting are these people with these airlines who are getting laid off, or people from Walt Disney who are getting laid off, because those are the people who have lobbyists working on behalf of their industry. But you are affecting more people than that. More people were listening to what was going on and watching what was going on, worrying about their ability to pay their rent that was due yesterday that they can't afford. Worried about the fact that, they have no food. Worried about the fact that they can't pay for medications, or maybe they've lost their health care because they don't have their job and they couldn't afford more people are being affected by this, and we can't afford to do this back and forth. Now, I will tell you, while I do recognize that Nancy Pelosi is catching a lot of slack, and I understand I'm kind of moving away from jobs here, but I do want to talk about this for just a second. I promise I'm only going to dwell here for just a minute. Well, I do recognize that a lot of people felt like yesterday specifically, Speaker Pelosi, if the counter proposal was based upon your original proposal, why didn't you just accept that $1.62 trillion bill? The question was asked, isn't something better than nothing? That question, mind you, is always being asked with her, but we're never seeing its equivalent being asked to the other side. Never, ever, 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 ever. But let me tell you something about negotiations, okay? I am no master negotiator by any means, but I will tell you this, that I do know a little something about negotiating, right? And what I do know is that the party that is willing to walk away has the most power. And as much as we want to make this a kumbaya moment and say, oh, this is just about the people, we're dealing with a political issue here. We're dealing with something that has to do with politics. So it's heavily coded in politics. And I don't mean just the politics of Nancy being able to keep her job. I mean the politics of the party, the politics of ideology, the politics of values. So anyone who tells you that this is just, I heard the quote yesterday, oh, this isn't about values, this is about the top line dollar. Well, the top line dollar are directly related to your values, sir. I'm not going to say who said it, but sir, but anywho, so when it comes to negotiating, clearly, again, the person who was willing to walk away has the most power. I'll never forget, I was negotiating the price of a car and was sitting at the table, and, I knew that, when you go in there, if you really like the car, you don't go in there showing that you really like the car. You give away your power, right? They're going to be able to come back. And this was when you actually could negotiate, the price of a car. Nowadays, you really don't have too much leeway. And again, when you're dealing with cash, you have the ability, right? So, long story short, I got up And I walked out the dealership. Thank you for your time. This deal just doesn't work for me. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your time. Got up, went to the car, started the car. Sales guy comes running out, willing to meet my demands. Or not my demands. That sounds horrible, right? I would never demand. Willing to meet my requests. I was willing to walk away. That is how I got what I wanted. Now, does that mean you will always get what you want? No. That's why you need to have a plan B, right? My plan B was go to a different dealership. Like, this is not the only dealership in town. Yeah. And then especially, when you're talking cash, you have more leverage than you do when you were like, I got to be financed. I need someone else's money to do what I want to do. But anyway, so the related to Speaker Pelosi, it's very, very evident that she is the person, regardless of what you want to say, when you look at the optics of what is going on, the fact that she has been unwilling to just settle, she has the power. Okay. But I don't want to make this just a power trip. I mean, truth be told, as I talked about in previous episodes, when it comes to Speaker Pelosi, I think she is very well aware of kind of the analogy that I used about a burning house. One person wants to use a water hose, and another person wants to take a single bucket of water and put water on the fire. Both parties can say, well, yeah, I've put water on the fire, but one party is going to be able to extinguish the fire, especially if it's massive, or they will at least have an increased likelihood of extinguishing that fire, compared to the other party that just wants to put the single bucket of water on a raging fire. When I can't. Look, Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, they didn't come up with a deal. Like, I will tell you, I am not in the camp of blaming Nancy Pelosi. I think, quite frankly, a lot of people who are not understanding what's going on don't truly understand negotiations. Now, again, does this mean that we are absolutely going to see something just because she's holding out? No. But I think that she is taking calculated measures, calculated risks, not even necessarily through her own train of thought. I'm very, very sure that she, in addition to other people, are working together to analyze the situation, to take the calculated risks. And quite frankly, I think that she is doing what she needs to do. I said in the very, very, very beginning, when all of this got started, that Nancy Pelosi needs to hold out. This was something I personally said. She needs to hold out and not be willing to settle. Quite frankly, I don't want to say I was concerned, but if you had asked me months ago when the conversation for a second stimulus package got started, if Nancy Pelosi would have been more likely to just accept anything for the sake of accepting something, quite frankly, I would have said yes. Not necessarily attributing it to her personally, but typically that's how politics works. You just capitulate at some point, right? And that's kind of what I was expecting. I'm glad. I'm glad that Nancy Pelosi is holding out. I'm utterly glad, because then let me tell you what would happen. If Nancy Pelosi were to settle for a lower amount, even if it did, for instance, provide $400 of stimulus, like that $1.62 trillion bill was proposed by Steve Mnuchin, that gave the $400 to the unemployed and gave $1,200 checks. Let me tell you, more likely than not, what would have happened. She would have accepted that. I can guarantee you that would not have been enough to meet the current demands of the economy. So when the data came out, or when it would come out, indicating that, it really didn't have as much impact as we wanted for the economy, what would have happened then in that hypothetical situation? Then the case would be made, well, see, we provided those unemployment benefits. We provided the $1,200. That didn't work, so we don't need to provide anything. That's what would happen. That is why, in my opinion, Nancy Pelosi needs to hold out. hold out for, at the very least, we know that that $600 stimulated the economy. We don't know. There's the devil we don't know. And the devil we don't know is if anything below $600 would stimulate the economy. You could say, well, Brittany, the LWA lost wages assistance program provided $300 extra for the unemployed. Can't we use that data? Well, not really, because we have several states that haven't even gotten the $300 yet. We have a state that has declined to receive that $300. So I don't think that data is as reliable as the data that we have concerning the $600. This is why if you need personal stimulus in your life, you need to be willing to hold out for a better deal. Because if we settle for a lesser deal, I'm guaranteeing you what will happen is the case will be made that, see, we don't need to help the American people anymore. Not just even in this current situation, but if there ever, God forbid, comes another situation where an emergency and enormous assistance is needed for our economy, the case will be made pointing back to 2020 saying, we don't need to consider, that's a waste of money trying to help those people. Don't fall for the okie doke. Don't do it. You even have Gregory Dacko. He's the chief U.S. economist at Oxford Economics. He says that what is going on does not bode well for the economy. He wasn't talking about the stimulus or anything like that. He was talking specifically about what's going on with jobs. It's sad, but it's telling that we had to wait for certain companies, certain industries to start going bad before politicians gave a damn. That's sad, if you ask me.